Free agency is fully open, and the Orioles should be trying to spend big this offseason. But they reportedly tried to do that last year and kind of came up empty. So, what could they learn from last year's free agency? We'll talk about that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, November 13th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, I'm going to take a look back at free agency from last year, right? The Orioles certainly did make their team better, and they spent more money than they had in a long time, as it was the first full offseason under David Rubenstein. But at the end of the day, none of the free agent acquisitions the O's made last offseason really made a big positive impact on the 2025 team. And to be honest, some of them kind of hurt the team, especially when we look at the early returns of someone like Charlie Morton. But the Orioles, we know, were at least in on some of the big names last year. They need to be more than in on some of the big names this year. And there's got to be stuff that they learned from last offseason. So to try and do that from a little bit of my perspective and a little bit of the Orioles' perspective, I'm going to go back through all of my free agent wish lists that I did last offseason. But before I start to do those episodes this winter, I want to kind of audit the Orioles and also audit myself on how I ranked those free agents, where they ended up signing, and how they ended up doing and how the O's looked for not signing some of those guys. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So again, if you've been with this show for a while, pretty much every offseason, especially since the Orioles started turning things around back in 2022, I do these free agent wish list episodes. I break it down by position. I don't do every position. I just kind of do the positions of need for the Orioles that given offseason. And I usually rank a top 6 of the current free agents who I think the Orioles should go after. It's never necessarily just these are, I think, the best 6 free agents available at the position ranked in that way. I also take into account what they might cost, how many years they might need in free agency. And that's been a big factor in the past. And even with David Rubenstein here, with Mike Elias at the helm, it is still a factor as well. So before I do all those episodes, like the plan for tomorrow is to rank the free agent closers, because with Felix Bautista out for most of next year, the O's should pay for a closer. I'll talk about all the starting pitchers, relievers, and potentially one of those big bats and the outfielders the Orioles could go get. But I first wanted to look back at my wish lists from last offseason, because again, why would you listen to me on these wish lists if all my lists I do are terrible and I never go back to kind of audit myself on them? So that is what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to start with the starting pitchers, then the relievers, then the hitters that I ranked for last offseason. So first of all, you got to kind of put yourself in the brain of last offseason. The O's were just coming off of making the playoffs again, but they struggled down the stretch. They got swept out of the postseason for the second straight year. There were some questions about the offense, but it was mostly like, will they bring back Santander, try to replace him? It seems like this offense, which was awesome in the first half last year, can still be one of the best in baseball. They were still top 10 in all offensive categories by the end of last year. But you looked at the pitching and you were like, the Orioles need to add some pitching, relievers, and starters. It's kind of where we were last offseason. So let's begin with what I said about starting pitching in free agency last year. I did a ranking of left-handed starters, and I did a ranking episode of right-handed starters. So let's start with the lefties. I ranked top 6. At number 6, I threw in Matthew Boyd, who ended up signing a 2-year, $29 million deal with the Cubs and was awesome. Had a 3.21 ERA and 31 starts, made the All-Star team. I did go back and listen, and I did say if Boyd was healthy, he'd be higher on the list. If you remember this time last year, Boyd had come back very late in the season from Tommy John to join the Guardians. He pitched a good amount in the postseason with Cleveland, but he was always very limited, and there were still a lot of questions about his health moving forward. He turned out to be healthy and turned out to be really good. definitely should have been much higher on the list. Number 5, I'll put Andrew Heaney, who signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Pirates. He was not very good. He made 23 starts, had a 5.25 ERA, and eventually was released by the Pirates, signed with the Dodgers down the stretch, made one outing there, but Heaney was not very good last year. Number 4, I put Sean Manaea, who re-signed with the Mets for 3 years, $75 million. He had some big injury issues this year, threw 61 innings only and had a 5.64 ERA when he was out there. Not a good first year. Number 3, I had Yusei Kikuchi, who signed a 3-year, $63 million deal very early in the offseason with the Angels. Ended up having a solid year, stayed healthy, made 33 starts, posted a 3.99 ERA. Certainly someone who would have helped out the Orioles. He might be available again this offseason because Kikuchi has been openly complaining about the Angels' weight room and their facilities, and it's been a little bit of a back and forth between him and the front office. So maybe those could go and get him this time. Number 2, I put Max Fried, who was awesome. Now, he signed the huge deal, 8 years, $218 million with the Yankees, but he also posted a 2.86 ERA in 32 starts. He was the ace in New York with Garrett Cole out for the season. And number 1, I had Blake Snell, who signed for 5 years, $182 million with the Dodgers. The Orioles were certainly in on Snell, but the price got too high, and also he just wanted to be a Dodger. He had a shoulder injury this year, so he only made 11 starts in the regular season with a 2.35 ERA, and then, of course, was really, really good in the postseason, helping the Dodgers to win the World Series. So I think I did okay on the lefty starter rankings. Re-ranking them, I'd probably flip Fried to number 1 over Blake Snell just because much less injury concerns for the two of them. Then I'd put probably Boyd number 3, then Kikuchi number 4, and then I don't think I'd be super interested in Manaea or Heaney, but I would say okay to begin with those rankings. Then we go to the right-handed starting pitchers, and at number 6, I had Justin Verlander. The veteran signed a 1-year, $15 million deal with the Giants. The Orioles were probably at least somewhat interested, right? Elias and Verlander were together with the Astros. They ended up signing Charlie Morton to a similar deal. But Verlander was much better. 29 starts, had a 3.85 ERA for the Giants. Probably would have been better than what Charlie Morton gave the Orioles, even though he kind of figured things out. Number 5, I had a guy who the Orioles actually signed. I had Tomoyuki Sugano as my number 5. Orioles gave him a 1-year, $13 million deal. He made 30 starts. He stayed healthy. His 4.64 ERA was a very up and down season. Really good start, really bad middle, was kind of solid down the stretch. Number 4, I had Luis Severino, who signed for 3 years, $67 million with the A's. He had a 4.54 ERA in 29 starts, but he was way better on the road than he was at home, pitching in that minor league hitters park in Sacramento. Severino has also been very outspoken about how bad the facilities were in Sacramento for players this year. Another guy who could be on the trade market because of that, and maybe the Orioles could go and try to get. Number 3 on my list was Walker Buehler. Red Sox signed him for a 1-year, $21 million deal. He was not good. He had a 4.93 ERA in 24 starts. Red Sox released him, ended up being a long reliever for the Phillies at the end of the season. Was not very good. Number 2 on my list was Nathan Eovaldi. I have been wanting the Orioles to get Nathan Eovaldi for like 5 years now. He re-signed with the Rangers for 3 years, $75 million, and he was awesome when he was on the mound. He had a 1.73 ERA in 22 starts, kind of Trevor Rogers-esque. Unfortunately, did have another injury, which took him out for about 10 starts this season, but when he was on the mound, he was really good. And then I didn't rank Corbin Burnes last offseason because I basically said, look, Corbin Burnes is the number 1 choice no matter what among right-handed starters. The Orioles should be trying to re-sign him. The Orioles did try to re-sign him, although he eventually took the hometown deal and went to Arizona, and then got Tommy John surgery pretty quickly. What I did say is, listen, I'm not even going to talk about Corbin Burnes. We knew Corbin Burnes. We knew him well. I don't need to rank him. He's the clear number 1. It was kind of everyone after Corbin Burnes. But number 1, I went out a bit on a limb. This is not someone that a lot of others had this high on their list, but I put Nick Pivetta as my number 1 choice. He ended up signing for 4 years, $55 million with the Padres, and he was awesome. He had a 2.87 ERA in 31 starts for San Diego this year. I think if I re-ranked them, I would still have Pivetta number 1 with Eovaldi number 2. Then you probably move Verlander up to 3, Severino sticks at 4, and then I'm not sure if I'd go after Sugano or Buehler. Guys like maybe Jack Flaherty or Nick Martinez or Michael Lorenzen would have maybe entered the list instead. But I feel like for the righty and the lefty starters, probably more the righties than the lefties, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit there. I think it was pretty good with those rankings, especially with Pivetta being at number one. Of course, the Orioles only got one of the players I ranked at all, giving that 1 year deal to Sugano, and he was probably a little bit worse than even I thought he was going to be. And that was the number one need for the Orioles in the offseason last year, was starting pitching. They ended up signing Morton, Kyle Gibson, and Sugano. Sugano was the best of the three. Morton was okay for a stretch. Gibson gave them basically nothing. It was a failure of bringing in starting pitching last offseason. But they also needed to add a little bit to their bullpen. The bullpen was strong coming into the year, but you can always use one or two guys. So I ranked lefty relievers, righty relievers, and kind of split them into even further categories. So let's talk relievers, because the O's are going to need to sign relievers this offseason way more than they did this time last year. So let's think about kind of auditing those reliever rankings. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we're kind of going back to audit my free agent wish list for the Orioles from last offseason to take a look at, hey, what could the O's do better this offseason? What could I do better with these lists when I start these wish lists, probably on the pod tomorrow to begin this offseason when the Orioles really should be doing some spending. And I'm trying to make it known that, hey, you know, if I really stink at these lists, there's probably no reason to listen to these lists, but hopefully I'm doing a solid job. And we also seem to be doing a solid job here at the Locked On Orioles podcast network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network. Some cool news that we got earlier this week. But let's dive into some of these relief pitcher wish lists I did from last offseason. I kind of did them in a weird way. So I did a normal list for left-handed relievers. I did a top 6. Then for the righties, I did kind of a weird thing, so I'll get to that in a moment. Let's start with the left-handed relievers. Number 6 on my list was Ryan Borucki, who signed a minor league deal with the Pirates, ended up having a 4.63 ERA in 35 innings, was released, ended up on the Blue Jays for a little bit, but was not on their postseason roster. He didn't end up being that good. Brooks Raley was number 5 for me. He signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Mets. Did have a 2.45 ERA in 25 2/3 innings. The reason why he was lower on my list is he was recovering from Tommy John surgery. It was known that he wouldn't be back and healthy for multiple months. He didn't debut until July for the Mets. So if he had been fully healthy, he would have been much higher, but you just knew you were only getting at most a half a season out of Brooks Raley. Number 4 on my list was Caleb Thielbar, who signed a 1-year, $3 million deal with the Cubs and was great. Had a 2.64 ERA in 58 innings. Number 3 was the lefty sidewinder Tim Hill, who signed for 1 year about $3 million with the Yankees. Also very good, 67 innings and a 3.09 ERA. Number 2 was another kind of sidewinder, Hobie Milner, who signed for 1 year, $2.5 million with the Rangers. Also solid, 70 1/3 innings, 3.84 ERA. And number 1 on my list was AJ Minter. He signed for 2 years, $22 million with the Mets. He only threw 11 innings. It was a 1.64 ERA, but it was only 11 innings because he had lat surgery in May and missed the remainder of the season. Minter was also coming off hip surgery, but with how good he was before the hip injury with the Braves, it seemed like a buy low candidate for a guy to break out, but unfortunately he got hurt again. Now, clearly the best left-handed reliever on the market last year was Tanner Scott. But I didn't include him because I knew the Orioles weren't going to dish out like 4 years, $80 million for a reliever, especially in a guy like Tanner Scott, who they know pretty well. So I just didn't put him on my list. He didn't end up being that amazing for the Dodgers this year anyway. But my re-rank would probably put Caleb Thielbar up from number 4 to number 1. He was just so good and productive for the Cubs. Then probably Hill number 2, Milner number 3, Raley number 4, and then I don't know how much you'd even want Minter and Barucki, although Minter, you do get the 2-year deal. Aroldis Chapman was probably the best lefty reliever this season. He signed to be the Red Sox closer. I'm good on Aroldis Chapman. Guys who could have made the list, Danny Coulomb, although the Orioles kind of declined his option, so it felt like they weren't going to bring him back anyway. Maybe Caleb Ferguson, Jalen Beeks, Sean Newcomb, no relation, all could have made the list. I was on Thielbar and Hill. Minter being number one. Again, he got injured, so it's not like he just pitched all year and was bad, but he did have an injury history. I wanted the O's to bet on that a little bit. Didn't work out for the Mets, but maybe he comes back in year 2 and is much better. Then to the right-handed relievers, where I did something a little bit different, because there's just so many right-handed relievers available out there every year that I felt like you couldn't just do one list of 6 of them. You had to break them in to kind of smaller categories. And the Orioles didn't really need a closer because they had Felix Bautista, but Bautista was coming off Tommy John, so he didn't exactly know what he would be. So I split them into 3 categories of 3 pitchers each. I did closers, I did the good setup men, and then I did kind of the under-the-radar middle relievers. So for my closers, the 3 of them, number 3, I did Jordan Romano, who signed a 1-year, $8 million deal with the Phillies. He was terrible. In 43 innings, he had an 8.23 ERA. That was a nightmare of a signing. Number 2 for me was Kirby Yates, 1 year, $13 million with the Dodgers after a great year with the Rangers. He got injured when he was on the mound. He had a 5.23 ERA in 41 innings, wasn't very good. And my number 1 was Clay Holmes, who was the closer for the Yankees, ended up signing with the Mets for 3 years and $38 million. But of course, the Orioles were reportedly very interested in Clay Holmes as a starter. And the reporting seems like the Orioles finished second to the Mets in the Clay Holmes sweepstakes. Mets signed him as a starter, and he was pretty solid. Had a 3.53 ERA in 31 starts. Now, I didn't include Jeff Hoffman on my list because I thought he would sign as a starter, but he would have been number 1. Of course, the Orioles had a 3-year, $40 million agreement with Hoffman before he failed the physical. They tried to renegotiate the deal. Same thing happened with the Braves. He ends up signing with the Blue Jays and then gives up basically a World Series losing home run in the 9th inning of Game 7 to Miguel Rojas, which was pretty funny. You can't lie. It's pretty funny. This list, though, was not very good because although Clay Holmes was good, he wasn't a closer. Kirby Yates was pretty bad. Jordan Romano was literally unusable. Carlos Estevez, Kenley Jansen, and Kyle Finnegan probably should have been on there instead. Next list was kind of those good setup men among the righties. Number 3, I did Tommy Kahnle, who had thrown basically a billion consecutive changeups with the Yankees. He signed a 1-year, $8 million deal with the Tigers and posted a 4.43 ERA in 63 innings, was basically like an okay middle reliever all year. Number 2 was Blake Trinan, who had come off a great postseason with the Dodgers. He re-signed with LA for 2 years, $22 million. He had a 5.4 ERA in 26 2/3 innings, had a forearm injury that kept him out for a lot of the year, came back in the postseason and was very bad in the playoffs. He seems like he might be done. And my number 1 was David Robertson, who, despite being 40 years old, had just been awesome with the Rangers. Phillies eventually signed him in July. He was a free agent until July when the Phillies signed him to a 1-year, $6 million deal. He was like a middle reliever for them down the stretch, had a 4 ERA in 18 innings. Guys who should have been there: Andrew Kittredge, who the Orioles actually signed, Chris Martin of the Rangers, and Phil Maton as well. So yeah, kind of missed a little bit on this one as well. And then I had 3 under the radar guys who I thought were more middle relief types, would be pretty cheap, but who could break out in somebody's bullpen. Number 3 was Joe Ross, who signed a 1-year, $4 million deal with the Phillies and was not good. 5.12 ERA in 51 innings and was released in August. Number 2 was Lucas Sims, signed for 1 year, $3 million with the Nats. He had a 14 ERA in 12 innings and then was done for the year. And my number 1 was Mike Soroka, who also signed for 1 year, $3 million with the Nationals, but they used him as a starter. He finished the year 90 innings and a 4.52 ERA. He was traded to the Cubs at the deadline. They moved him back into the bullpen. He was good until he got injured and then was kind of out of that. Guys like Jacob Junis and Sean Armstrong probably should have been on this list instead. So if you look at the righty relievers, I won't lie to you, I did pretty poorly on these wish lists. Here's the thing, though. When you put it all together, the best righty reliever that signed last year, I mean, if you don't count closers, was probably Andrew Kittredge, and the Orioles signed him. Like maybe Kittredge or Martin or Maton, maybe. Like maybe Kenley Jansen, he was all right with Anaheim. But even Jeff Hoffman really struggled at times with the Blue Jays this year. It was not a good class out there. And when you look back year after year, even previously to last offseason, relievers signing in free agency is kind of a toss-up. There are a lot of bulk of relievers generally available every year in free agency, but there's not a lot of good ones. And the way that good teams generally build their bullpens is they build them with young, cost-controlled relievers. Because unfortunately, the way pitchers and the way specifically relievers are used in Major League Baseball in 2025 is that these guys throw hard, they throw max effort, you get them out there for an inning at a time, you pitch them, 60 times in a season, and then their arms start to break down. Relievers are volatile. They're great one year. They're barely a big leaguer the next year. They go so up and down. It's just a better investment generally to have most of your relievers be internal or guys you got on waiver claims, which is how the Orioles have built most of their bullpens the past 3 or 4 seasons and generally had success with those bullpens that Elias has put together with the Brian Bakers and the Yennier Canos and the Cionel Perez's of the world in those bullpens. It's just kind of a better way to build it. Now, there's always space for 1 or 2 free agents in every bullpen, but you don't want to be in a spot where you're building an entire bullpen out of free agency. The Dodgers kind of tried to do that this year, and the bullpen almost ended their chances to go back-to-back. Their offense and starting pitching was just too good, and they overcame it, and they're the Dodgers, and they have Shohei Ohtani. I say that because the O's need to add a better bullpen, and I think they will sign probably 2 relief pitchers still, even after trading back for Andrew Kitchers. They'll probably add still a closer and another setup man type, but you shouldn't get more than 3 with Kitchers and the 2 other guys, because these guys are going to break down when they're in free agency, means they're older, probably more likely to break down. Trust more in the guys who kind of showed out last year, the Dietrich Enns, the Rico Garcias, the Grant Wolframs, the Yarmil Geraldos of the world. Find other intriguing arms from AAA or from waivers. Probably a better way to build a bullpen. Not a lot of really good long-term free agents in terms of relievers that are ever really that available. So then let's finish things up with the hitters. And now, even though the Orioles offense definitely was disappointing for the final 2 months of 2024, right? They kind of fell off down the stretch. It was their biggest issue. It was their biggest issue in the postseason. They scored 1 run in 2 games and were swept out of the wild card series by the Royals. I think myself and a lot of Orioles fans kind of thought yes, that was a problem for 2 months, but the offense was also awesome for the first 4 months. The offense was also awesome for the entirety of the previous season in 2023. It was still a top 10 offense throughout that span. So it was the O's should certainly add on the edges, maybe replace Santander, but there wasn't really a huge push of the Orioles need to add the mega bat in free agency. It was either re-sign Santander or sign someone in his place, and you're probably good. And that was generally the plan for Elias and the Orioles. So we'll talk about kind of the wish list I had surrounding that. It was really just 2 things. It was a right-handed hitting outfielder, and it was a backup catcher for Adley Rutschman. So how'd I do on those lists? That's to finish off the show. Coming up next. So auditing those hitter wish lists from last offseason to finish things off. Let's start with the backup catchers. Remember, James McCann was hitting free agency last year. The Orioles wanted a backup behind Adley Rutschman. They knew that Samuel Basallo was not going to be ready for opening day, especially not defensively ready to be somebody's backup catcher. So it was pretty much assumed that the O's were going to sign someone in free agency. I did 6 backup catchers on my list. Number 6 was Yasmani Grandal, who signed a minor league deal with the Red Sox, but never got back to the big leagues and then kind of stepped away from the game in the middle of the season. Number 5 was Carson Kelly, who signed for 2 years, $12 million with the Cubs. He was awesome. He had a 115 WRC plus. Remember, that's a kind of all-encompassing offensive stat with league average being 100. So 115 is 15% better than league average. He was a 2.6 FanGraphs WAR. He had a career year and actually became the Cubs starting catcher last season. Number 4, I had Danny Jansen on there. He signed 1 year, $8.5 million with the Rays. He was basically a league average bat. He was okay, 1.3 WAR. He was traded to the Brewers at the deadline. It was better there, but he played less. Wasn't a great season. Number 3 for me was Kyle Higashioka, signed for 2 years, $13.5 million with the Rangers. Had a 93 WRC plus and a 1 WAR. Wasn't a great season. Number 2, I actually put James McCann on the list to bring him back at number 2. He signed with the Diamondbacks for the league minimum eventually after signing a minor league deal with the Braves, not getting to the big leagues, and the D-backs signing him away. He did have a 110 WRC plus in Arizona. He was pretty solid as a backup. Orioles probably tried to get him back when they had all those catching injuries, but the D-backs had scooped him up before they could. And then number one, I put Travis d'Arnaud. He signed for 2 years, $12 million with the Angels. He was awful. He was worth negative WAR. He had a 64 WRC plus. If I re-ranked them, I just didn't go high enough on Carson Kelly. I had him on my list, but I would have put him number one. Then probably McCann number two, Danny Jansen 3, Higashioka 4, d'Arnaud 5, and Grandal 6. Funny thing is, I didn't even put Gary Sanchez on my list, and the Orioles ended up signing him to a 1-year, $8 million deal to be the backup. He was pretty good when he was healthy. Like, he hit pretty well, but he missed most of the season with a wrist and then a knee injury, so that didn't help out the Orioles much. And because Adley got injured, then the other guys they brought in, like Maverick Hanley and Chadwick Tromp, also got injured. Before they finally got Samuel Basallo to the big leagues, they were bringing in basically anybody and everybody to catch for this team. It was kind of a disaster, but someone like Carson Kelly or McCann or even Danny Jansen would have kind of just stabilized things probably a little bit more. Austin Hedges not on the list because at this point I'm just assuming he's either re-signing with the Guardians every offseason or retiring. Of course, he has already re-signed with the Guardians this offseason, although he is a great defensive catcher to have as your backup. And then the other need for the team was right-handed hitting outfielders. And Anthony Santander was hitting free agency. I did not put him on my list because I just wanted to get to some different names that we didn't know as much about. So this is the non-Santander list. For me, he probably would have been number 2 on the list behind who I had number 1. But here are my top 6 for the right-handed hitting outfielders. Number 6 was Mark Canha. He signed a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Royals. He was terrible. He had a 49 WRC plus and was released in August. His career is probably done. Tommy Pham was number 5 for me, signed for 1 year, $4 million. He was basically a league average hitter for the Pirates, but didn't get traded at the deadline, which was pretty interesting. The years might be numbered here for Tommy Pham. Number 4 was Jurickson Profar, who signed 3 years, $36 million with the Braves, had a 122 WRC plus, was pretty good, but he missed half the season. For injury, Connor? No, not for injury, because he was popped for PEDs early in the year and had an 81-game suspension at the beginning of the season. Number 3 for me was our old friend Randal Grichuk, who has just dominated the Orioles in his career, signed for 1 year, $5 million with the D-backs. He had an 82 WRC plus. He was not good. He was traded to the Royals at the deadline and got much worse down the stretch with Kansas City. Number 2 was the player the Orioles signed. That was Tyler O'Neill. O signed him for 3 years, $49.5 million with the opt-out after year 1. Of course, O'Neill has already decided to opt into that contract, so he'll be back in Baltimore for the next 2 years. He had a 91 WRC plus. He played in only 54 games because of a multitude of injuries. It wasn't great. And then number 1 for me was Teoscar Hernandez, who did re-sign with the Dodgers for 3 years and $66 million. Although he wasn't that good, the defense was bad. He was just a 102 WRC plus hitter, basically league average. So if I had to re-rank, I would, and even Santander, right, signed 5 years, $92 million and missed basically the entire year with injury. Like, it was not a good group of outfielders out there. I wouldn't want any of these guys. If I had to re-rank, I would still rank Teoscar Hernandez number 1. I still think I got that one right. It's because he was the most healthy and productive. Honestly, the rest of the guys, like Profar with the suspension, O'Neill with the injuries, Pham, Grichuk, Canha, all weren't good. I wouldn't really want any of those guys if we had a do-over. Not even what I want Santander, honestly. Like, you know who would be probably number 1 on this list if you really broke it down? It might be Ramon Laureano. So kudos to Mike Elias for that being the better signing than O'Neill, going to get Laureano and how good he was for the Orioles this season. And the other guys that could have been on there, Harrison Bader was really good. I think the O's should go after him this year. And then honestly, like, Austin Slater missed some time with injury, but he was at least solid when he was on the field for the White Sox and the Yankees this season. Our old friend could have been on this top 6 over guys like Canha and Pham. It was a bad group of right-handed hitting outfielders that last offseason when the Orioles needed one. Listen, in my opinion, they ended up getting the second best option on the list in Tyler O'Neill. And Teoscar Hernandez, I don't think ever talked with other teams. He wanted to be a Dodger again the entire time. So you could argue that O'Neill was the number 1 available guy if the O's didn't want to go back to Santander. And they also got Laureano on top of that, who ended up being really good. So I think on paper, Elias and the Orioles actually did a good job in this right-handed hitting outfielder perspective of replacing Anthony Santander. The bigger issue was there was just nobody that good that was really available. So if they're going to do that again, whether it's Harrison Bader or hopefully maybe a bigger name, bigger money outfielder to add some more thump into this lineup this offseason, there is definitely some better options who are out there, and hopefully the O's can take advantage. So that is a look back at all of my wish list. Let me know, Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Let me know here in the YouTube comments, how do you think I did overall with these wish lists? What can the Orioles learn from free agency last year, looking at the pool of players who was available this year? Of course, if you listen as well, make sure to subscribe, follow the show, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star rating and a review. That really helps us out. And if you have Orioles thoughts, mailbag questions, you want to talk some ball, you want to give some feedback on the show, whatever it may be, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. So unless we get some more player acquisition or coaching staff news between now and when I record next, we're going to have our first free agency wish list episode of the offseason coming up on Friday. I'm going to take a look at the closers. The Orioles are going to be without Felix Bautista for most and maybe all of the 2026 season. The best way to go get a closer, I think, is just to sign one in free agency because it's a really good class of closers who is out there. Edwin Diaz might be the best one in the game. He's available. We got a new addition to the list in Pete Fairbanks and some other interesting names. I'll rank them on my wish list coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.